Hello everyone, this is Terry with Futures.io, and as always, I would like to thank you for joining us today. It is my pleasure to welcome back Barrett from NinjaTrader for today's webinar, NinjaTrader 8, newest features, release sneak peek. Throughout the webinar, if you have a question, please feel free to type them in the questions box. We'll do our best to answer them at the end of the event. This webinar will be recorded and posted on the Futures.io website within 24 to 48 hours. If you're watching this on YouTube afterwards, please do us a favor and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed the webinar. And as always, please feel free to share, comment, subscribe to our channel. It really helps us a lot. For sharing news, events, and information, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter using @Futures.io. And now, without further delay, I'll hand it over to Brett, and you'll get the pop-up to share your screen. All right, there it is. She's all yours.
All right, thanks, Terry. All right, guys, so as Terry mentioned, my name is Brett Barrett. I'm the product manager over at NinjaTrader. I've been in the webinar room with you guys a few times in the past now. I can't remember how many times now, but starting to get up there. And in these webinars, what I like to do is just run through, I kind of view this as community outreach and being able to just kind of hang out with the guys and gals in the trading rooms here at Futures.io and talk a little bit about NinjaTrader, and specifically, we're going to cover the new NinjaTrader 8 release that just came out this week. This is release 19 of the NinjaTrader 8 product. We're already getting up there with quite a number of releases, but that kind of goes along with our continual iteration, and we've moved to developing about releasing major new features for NinjaTrader 8, coming out with a new release, I'll say quarterly, every 3 months or so, we'll post a release out there, just giving our customers and the user base the latest and greatest that we're working on with the product and what's going on. And so we've released NinjaTrader R19. If you haven't downloaded it yet, that's just fine, since in this webinar we'll be actually going through some of the new stuff in there. Reading release notes can get a little boring sometimes, so why not hear from it directly from the product manager himself? So without further delay, I'm going to get into it. I do need to get through a couple quick disclaimers, so bear with me just momentarily. And then once I get through those, I'll dive right in and get into the new release. The risk of loss in trading can be substantial, regardless of whether it's in securities, futures, contracts, or foreign exchange. You should therefore carefully consider whether such trading is suitable for you in light of your circumstances and financial resources. You may sustain a total loss of the funds that you deposit to your broker to establish or maintain a position in the commodity, futures, or foreign exchange markets, and you may incur losses beyond those amounts. You can learn more about these risks by inquiring with your broker directly. And finally, this presentation is brought to you by NinjaTrader LLC, a software development company which owns and supports the NinjaTrader trading platform. NinjaTrader LLC is an affiliated company to NinjaTrader Brokerage. This presentation is for information purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell any security, future, or foreign exchange contract. Any questions that you're not related to the NinjaTrader trading platform should be sent to your brokerage firm directly. All right, so appreciate letting me get through that. So as I mentioned, I'm going to jump right in. So in today's webinar, like I said, I'm going to focus on the new features in the product. We're going to talk about a couple of the major things, a few of the minor things, and then if we have time, I'll actually get into some tricks with some hidden functionality that may not be immediately obvious to those of you that have been using the product. Now, if you are new to NinjaTrader, and this is your first time seeing the product, I will stop occasionally to explain a little bit more detail what I may be going through, but largely I'll assume that in the community, the viewers here have at least know of NinjaTrader or used the trading platform before, so we'll just dive into it. So NinjaTrader 8 R19, we focused on a number of things in this release. Some of the things that we focused on was options support, and I talked a little bit about that in preview capacity in my last webinar. We have released that now in NinjaTrader release 19 officially. It's available for NinjaTrader brokerage customers only for options on futures. We're planning to expand that, but we felt that this was a great opportunity to kind of get our foot in the door and get a release out with some functionality so that we can get our customers' feedback, continue to iterate, and we've got a list of additional features and things that we're going to continue to improve and build upon the option chain, or the option support that we've now released as part of NinjaTrader 8R19. So as part of the options support with NinjaTrader, as I mentioned, it's available through NinjaTrader brokers right now, and that's because we had to develop a custom connection. It's called the Web API to CQG, or NinjaTrader Continuum, and this connection has the additional support for options built into it. The old API that we used did not have that support that we needed to properly support options. So if you contact your broker and ask for option support on NinjaTrader, you will be able to get your questions answered on how you will need to do that and what that means. For today, I did cover in my last webinar some of the option chain functionality. I'm going to cover briefly the option chain window. And then a couple things have changed since I last previewed it, so I'll show those off as well, and go from there. Today, as of today with release 19, you'll be able to go to new option chain in the NinjaTrader Control Center. The NinjaTrader Control Center, once that's displayed here, you'll select an instrument up in the top left corner here. And I've got just the ES 1219 contract here, which will load the option chain below. We've got the option chain here, which signifies all the option chain data downloaded directly from the provider. And we see all the individual option contracts on listing with that provider. And if I expand one of these, I can see this is 22 days out. This is the 10/18/2019 weekly, 3 weekly options contract. If I expand that out, I'll immediately get an option chain with all the last bid, ask, and last information, volume information by default, with our standard in the money line, bottom left in the money, bottom right and puts in the money on the right hand side, including we've got kind of a nice little display here which will show a ruler, which is just kind of where the underlying is moving up and down in price in relation to that option or that future. And a couple of things that we've done, and I showed off a large portion of this in my last webinar in preview, but a couple of things that are new, and I can't recall if it was in the old or not. But if I right click on the window, we kind of leave you with a basic display here. You've got a bunch of additional options of which you can turn on. Ones that are most important that I wanted to talk about is you can turn on the volume, and you can turn on ask money value, bid money value, and last money value. So I actually encourage you to do that if you're doing options on futures. The reason why is as I do that, I now get to see what the cash value is for point move in that option underlying. So I can kind of see options are a little tricky with that. It's not as clean as futures. So the money value and seeing how much value there is on buying one of those contracts is definitely a cool thing, especially when you're dealing with options on multiple futures instruments. You'll notice that as I click on the bid and ask here, I then get a selection bar, which the option chain window, as it is today as we've implemented it, it's kind of like a directory. It's a way for you to get the instrument definition into a trading window, which you then can place a trade. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is the actual options. If I wanted to trade this option, the actual option name, if I expand this here, so if I want to look at this, this is the actual option instrument. So you could type this in manually if you wanted to. So EW3 space the strike, put or call, and then, or I'm sorry, the date, and then the strike. That's the actual instrument name. So when I place a trade, I'm placing it on that instrument. And what the option chain window does is it basically allows you to pre-fill that instrument selection just by clicking on the row. And I'm doing that by linking the instrument. So I've selected a instrument link here, pick a color or a channel, pick a order entry window, select that channel as well. And now as I select and move, you'll notice that the strike price moves up or down. And then if I go over to the call side, I now get a call or C on that instrument. So I can basically zero into that instrument on any order entry windows I choose to use. And now I can then place that buy or sell order on that instrument using the existing NinjaTrader order entry tools. Right now we have support for single leg option orders. One of the things we do plan to look into is multi-leg option orders. We do not have that implemented as of today, but that is something we are working on for those of you that would like to submit multiple orders at one go instead of just one order at a time, basically. So we've released this as part of R19. For those of you that are currently trading options with NinjaTrader Brokerage, you can utilize this window today. So that is the option chain window. And if you have any questions on that or functionality, let me know. There's a few other things I'm going to skip over, but there's things like you can turn on a nice little color distribution on the volume. There's various other features and customization you can do on the option chain window. So so hopefully you guys have fun playing around with the customization there. Okay. So that is the option chain window released as part of R19 this week. Other focuses of R19 were our Order Flow Plus tool set. So I've got a couple of those open in my charts on the right-hand side of my monitor. Included in here, I've got the Order Flow Plus volumetric bars, and then I've got the volume profile on here as well. I want to start talking about the volumetric bar enhancements. So there was a number of things we did here. We're continuing to iterate on our Order Flow Plus package that we released, I believe, last year, continuing to add user requested features, things like that. And one of the things that we did add and was commonly requested was just a visual display item, which was to center the open close bar in the middle. So our first implementation is we put the open close bar is on the left side of this box here. And then the box kind of contains the entire range of that single bar. It includes your delta and your bid and ask volume on that bar. So now what you can do, and this kind of works well in combination with some other settings, is you can now go center open close on bar, click apply. So that just moves it over, which, okay, that's great. But the reason why that's cool is so now you can also combo it with the show as profile. So if I go show as profile here, so now I've got kind of a bar that kind of looks like a profile, and I can continue to iterate on this. So if I go to the box grid or box outline colors, for example, so let's say I go to the outline and I set that to transparent, is what I generally like to do. So now I'm left with kind of a display here, which just highlights the open close. It's kind of nice and compact, a little bit of a nicer display, if I would say so for me. You can also, if you need to clean it up a bit more. I mean, the interesting thing with Volumetric is there's so many properties here and things you can do. So like I can hide the text, for example. I'll go ahead and hide that in. And this actually plays well with another setting which we recently added, which was the size filter property. So there's a new property on here called size display filter. This was also requested. And the idea behind this is I only want to see on my chart when bid and ask volume in bid ask mode. This also works in delta, which means or delta is greater than my size display filter. So if I go ahead and set this to something like 1,000 on ES, for example, and click apply, you'll notice that a bunch of the data, I don't get a bar now for every single row. I only get bar data for rows of which have volume greater than 1,000. And so if I go ahead and increase that, let's go 1,500, you'll see even more go away. And the idea behind that is that I can kind of build a visual heat map of where there was imbalance. So if I, or just a lot of bid-ask volume, for example, and to clean it up a bit more, I'll actually go with, let's say, 1,000 here, and then I'll come over here and I'll go to show maximum. I'll turn that off, click apply. And so I end up with this kind of heat map looking thing where I can draw my support and resistance levels on areas which have the most volume. So that was the idea behind that. And so let me go back into the settings. So size display filter, something we've added to our volumetric bars. We've also added a few minor things, such as our, if you do show bar statistics, I actually don't think this is very minor. I actually think it's very helpful. Which if you just turn that on as is, you'll get a bunch of statistics, which I'll go ahead and turn my text back on. Okay. And if I add, so the delta from the high and low, that's showing you that's something that we added. And what it's showing you is let me go ahead and just turn that on. So I'll turn all these off, click apply, and color for text. Okay, and then I'll zoom in here. Yeah, right. Okay, so what that's doing is it's showing you the relative delta since it's reached its high or low in the bar. So it's kind of like a marker from when you hit the high or low of the bar, it starts adding up the amount of delta that occurred from that higher when we hit that high or low point, and that then totals it up here. So it's kind of an interesting data point. So definitely something to keep an eye out for. So that was recently added. And one thing that was also hotly requested, which if I'll go ahead and head on down, I'll turn off the statistics again. Okay, and I'll turn off the size filter. And we'll go to show imbalance. So we already had imbalance. So imbalance simply being the shading on, if there's 1.5, you can set up the ratio 1.5 to whatever 3 times the volume on the bid side versus the offer side on a diagonal comparison. So from a bid price to an ask price, then we would paint that. So we've got some pink and some gray, or some cyan here, showing imbalances on both the bid and the ask side. Now we've got imbalance mode where you can toggle to horizontal. And as I go to horizontal, that now does a horizontal direct price level comparison. The idea behind here, it's a subtle idea, but an important one, which is that you can, the classic idea is, well, there's a battleground between a bid and an ask price, which typically, for futures, it would be, let's say, a tick or just a few ticks in range. So doing some type of diagonal comparison on that kind of battleground, if you will, made a lot of sense. But then if you've got things with large bid-ask spreads, or you really want to look at it from just a price level perspective, so you're not looking at the battleground, you want to look at the battleground in terms of just individual price levels. how many times at that price level, is there an imbalance where at that price level, we're getting more buys than sells or vice versa? And if we're getting an imbalance on just that price level, then I want to know about it. So that is the horizontal imbalance mode. So it was hotly requested, as I mentioned, and something that we added to our volumetric bars. And then the last thing we added was we added a volume mode. So if I go back into the properties on the data series window, we've got the data series. I'll go down here to show volume, give that a check mark, click OK. So now I've got this volume profile looking, which is basically exactly what it is, volume profile tacked on to the right of my bars, where now I can see where it basically is the total of the delta on that row for the total volume. So instead of trying to do the mental math in your head as to where the most volume was, you get a nice little bar on the right-hand side just showing you where those important price levels are. So just another visual aid. Yes, you could have added a volume profile indicator to this and tried to overlay it. This just simplifies the approach, makes it easier to set up, and should improve the experience overall. So that's volumetric bars and things that we've added in release 19. Last thing I'll cover as far as order flow plus enhancements is if I go down to my bottom chart here, I've got a daily chart of the ES1219. And we spent some time on VWAP because we've got some requests from customers that with VWAP, it's really important at what time you start the VWAP calculation. That seems to be the key. So with the traditional VWAP calculation, it's just every session. And at the start of the session, a new session will start a new VWAP and have it moving forward. That usually typically means that you'll get a kind of an unstable or fast moving VWAP right at the beginning of the day, and then it kind of stabilizes towards the end of the day as volume comes in. And for those of you that don't know, VWAP, volume weighted average price, just the more volume you have going on, the more over time, the more stable it gets, the harder it is to move unless a significant amount of volume comes in. So the question is where to start your VWAPs. And we added a couple of interesting modes that unlock some new analysis capability, which is kind of a novel idea, which is just letting you choose at what time to reset the VWAP. So if I go to indicators here, go down to order flow plus VWAP. The new property here is called reset interval. And we can set this to every session, which is basically the equivalent of the old VWAP. And you now can do weekly and monthly. And that works in combination with this trading hours template. So you can set a trading hour template if you want to use something that's not if you want to set a different time of which to start your VWAP, that's how you do it, by picking your trading hour template. But more importantly, like if I'm on a daily chart, usually I wouldn't use VWAP on a daily chart prior to R19, but now I can come in and I'll do like a week and a monthly here. So if I do weekly here, I'll get a VWAP which starts basically every week and kind of gives me some levels to trade off of for the rest of the week. And then I can also go to monthly, which is probably more appropriate on a daily chart. So here's a view of a monthly VWAP, which VWAPs are always interesting to me personally. I love VWAPs, especially when in combination with the standard deviation bands, which which we also did add. I mean, I won't talk about it much, but we added some additional properties on the standard deviation in R19. So you can just customize the opacity a little bit better, the colors. You can customize that a little better if you want to have a little different display with those. So VWAP reset interval new in R19. All right, so moving along, and if you have any questions on that VWAP, just go ahead and type it in while it's fresh in your mind. I will be stopping here probably in the next 15 minutes or so, and then just take some questions and things like that and go from there. Moving along, the next thing you'll notice is the FX correlation window in the bottom center of my screen. This is also a new window to NinjaTrader. We wanted to expand our offering in FX. We're continuing to expand our support and enhance support of all of the types of instruments that you can trade with NinjaTrader, which is futures, Forex, CFDs, equities, and we also have some cryptocurrency market data support. So we're continuing to expand on that. And one of the things we felt we could expand on was an FX correlation window. And it's just it's a good utility window, especially for if you're new in the FX industry. And all it simply does is it takes all the FX pairs, and you can add additional pairs here to the window. But it simply does some correlation math on it to understand how correlated these instruments are from each other. So if I place two trades in two FX pairs, are they going to be correlated, and hence I've basically doubled my position, or are they not correlated, and hence trading them really are independent in how they move? And with the FX correlation window, and the reason why this is limited to FX, we did look into allowing this window to work with other instrument types as well. But for the correlation matrix math to work, all the instruments have to share the same price range, which just so happens that, or relative range, I should say, or tick size, however you want to put it. If it shares that, then it is possible to do a relative comparison and correlation on that. And with FX, that is the case. So we are able to put this in a matrix and display it across the entire broad scope of the FX market. And there is a drop down here, and this is done in real time, by the way. And there is a drop down where you can look at the correlation either on an hourly basis, which simply means in the last hour of trading, how correlated were they? This will be the most dynamic and update the most. The next option is day, where you can select in the last day of trading, how correlated were these instruments. So this typically will this does not update as frequently as the hourly comparison. Then finally week, and this will look at in the last week, how correlated were these instruments. Now, obviously, most of the instruments either had a nice run up or run down, and hence they all are loosely or are correlated. So we see a lot of blue on our map. And for those of you that may not know or may not have seen a FX correlation matrix before, the numbers simply represent if the number is 1, that means it's 100% correlated. If it's -1, that means it's 100% negatively correlated. And if it's 0 or somewhere in between, it's just grays of 100% correlated or 100% non-correlated. So we shade that based on the colors and the range between 1 and -1, and kind of make it a little bit look a little bit like a heat map, if you will. And then finally, you can do it based on in the past month of trading, so a little bit wider time frame. This will only change month by month, and then finally over the last year. This gives you the largest look back period, and will allow you to see the correlation over the last year of time. So that's the FX correlation window. So excited about that. Should add some value to those of you that trade Forex within NinjaTrader. And kind of branching off from the FX correlation, we kind of took a look and got inspired by the FX correlation matrix, and we thought, where else can we introduce correlation features and functionality in the product? This is an area that we're actively exploring, And as part of that exploration, we found that we could add a correlation indicator. So if I right-click on the chart, go to Indicators, I've got a new correlation indicator, which allows me to select an instrument that I would like to compare how correlated or not I am. So if I just want to do a quick comparison with the NQ, or let's do the 1219, I type that into the instrument, select OK, and now I'll get a correlation chart here, which shows me, again, same logic, between 1 and -1, how correlated or not they are on the daily time frame. And so in this case, it just happens to be that they are very correlated, which you would expect since they loosely follow each other. And we've added that as well in a common use case that I would think for the correlation indicator is not so much adding it on a chart, which is a great way to use it, but also I've got in my market analyzer window in the middle, top middle here, I've got a correlation column. And the correlation column, I've done the same thing. I've said, I want to compare all my instruments to the SP 500, for example. And what it will do then is for every single instrument on my market analyzer, compare that against the SP 500 benchmark and score it and based on how correlated or not it is. I've also added a heat map on there, or a color distribution on that column, which again, just for those of you that would like to see the setup, I can right-click, go to Columns. I added the indicator column here. So there's an indicator and selected the correlation indicator by selecting Indicators, Correlation. And then I've selected my instrument here by typing in, I could either do the index if I've got index data, which would be caret SP 500, or I can just simply use the ES as a reference. So there's the 1219 contract, and now I've set up a correlation indicator. And then if you do that, you're not going to get the color distribution. So if you go down, scroll on down to visual settings, enable color distribution, I gave that a check. This just makes it to where it kind of mirrors what we're getting in the FX correlation window, where it's shading based on the min-max scene and just highlights those things that are correlated and those things that are not as correlated. So that's the correlation features. We plan to expand more in that area. I think it's an interesting area to continue to iterate on and advance the product. So just keep an eye out for future development that direction. Nothing I can comment on right now, but just a very interesting topic in the trading industry. So I'm going to quickly go through a couple of highlights in the last release, just that I believe are highlights anyways. A few of those being, we've really spent a lot of time in this release working on some performance enhancements. Some of our internal metrics, we're seeing 20 to 30% performance increase in, for example, chart rendering time. The mileage is highly variable on this kind of stuff. Usually, we focused on scenarios where you have heavy rendering, lots of data on charts, things like that. If you are a heavy user of the product, use a lot of charts, you're going to see the most in R19 as far as from a performance improvement standpoint. We've also switched completely over. We released our beta adapter to interactive brokers back in R16, which was early this year. We've made that, it's no longer in beta, and now is fully used. We've switched over to the latest version of Trader's Workstation and done all that kind of stuff to kind of make sure that we stay up to date with our vendors and those that we have connectivity with. We've also made some improvements to IQ Feed and Kinetic. We've updated to latest versions of their IQ Connect clients and also protocols with Kinetic, so that and one of the advantages of doing that was if you were to use the Kinetic end of day free feed or you're a paid Kinetic subscriber, whenever you would pull up a stock chart after hours, for example, you had to wait for the first tick to come in, which could be a while after hours, to show the last bar, since the last daily bar was built in real time. Now that's built using historical data, so you don't no longer have to wait for that to come in. You just get a complete chart, no matter if you open that chart after hours. So for those of you that trade after hours or are doing analysis after hours, that will be a welcome change. Lastly, one thing that I think is pretty useful, and I use it all the time now, you may have already seen it, but if I go ahead and customize something, and let's say I want to change the color on something, if you have some set of colors that you're using most often, we're going to float those up to the top now. So we've got this kind of line here where the actual drop down of all the color selections take place. But now just recently used colors will now show up across top. Just makes it a little easier to set those colors up whenever you're needing to configure multiple plots. Comes in handy, gotta say. And there's several things that we've continued to improve upon in that general area, which is things like adding new hotkeys. You can configure new hotkeys in the Tools Hotkeys menu. Things like, this was also pretty requested, so in the chart, you can now switch between fixed and automatic scaling. You can snap the chart back to the last bar on the chart, for example, or set a template. You know, you can do a hotkey to quickly set a template. So these are all things, you know, we're continuing to improve on the product in that way. So, you know, expect to continue to see those minor improvements over time as we, you know, work on the NinjaTrader 8 product. So that's kind of the highlights of this release. Just gonna check some notes here and make sure I got everything. Yep, looks like I covered most of everything. So there's a bunch of work that we're doing and we'll continue to do on our quarterly release cycles. So we're always curious to get the feedback on stuff that we've implemented and added here. We're looking for feedback on the option stuff. So we try to make ourselves as open as possible. For those of you that have had communication with our support team is very responsive. For those of you that are using the new release, I would absolutely welcome any feedback on that release. If you would like to get that to me, you can always throw attention Brett in the subject line of an email, and the platform support team, if you send an email to platformsupport@ninjatrader.com with any general feedback and put attention Brett in there. You don't even have to do that, but we're definitely really appreciate that kind of stuff. You know, we have taken a direction with the NinjaTrader 8 development where we're really taking in user feedback, taking care of things that we can that come in. So getting that user feedback is key. So please do that. It definitely helps us out. All right, and let me see here. And so the last thing that I'll talk about, and the reason why it's only top of mind for me right now, is that we have spent some time working on performance in the product. And every release, we usually release something performance related. We always see room for improvement in anything that we do. So we'll continue to do that. But one of the lesser known things for those of you that, you know, if the market's getting volatile, the thing with NinjaTrader is that the more indicators, things that you run real time on the product, it's directly related to how, or correlated, I should say, to how busy the market is. So if the market's going, starts to get really volatile, a setup that you may have had that works well when the market's, you know, 50% less volatile, you know, may not work as well. So if that you do run into that scenario, we added this in a previous release and we're getting a lot of good feedback on it, so I did want to bring it up, which if you go to the new and NinjaScript output window, for those of you that may not be a developer or use that window at all, it's basically just a debug window for those users that develop third-party scripts. But if you open it, and in the right-click menu, we've got a NinjaScript utilization monitor window here. So we added this, I want to say, beginning of last year. And what it is it starts counting and tracking the amount of time an indicator, whether it's NinjaTrader's default stuff or any custom third-party stuff you've installed, it will just start counting how much time it's spent rendering and how much time it's spent calculating. And the reason why this is important is that seeing numbers here, you will see numbers. So for example, if I move this chart around, this causes the chart to re-render, and you'll see that I get total time, the candlesticks, because there happens to be the most candlesticks on the chart, that's taking the most time to render from a milliseconds perspective. So this is 1.9 seconds of total render and calculation time that this chart style candlestick has done. And as long as you have, and I like to use that as my benchmark, but what's important to note is if you want to look at from a performance perspective, how your platform's running, if you open this up, what's important is not how high the numbers are, but just the sorting of high to low as to what's taking up the most at the very top. Usually there'll be some outlier, something taking 3, 4, 5 times the amount of resources than anything else. And if that's the case, then that allows us to zero in on that specific indicator and perhaps optimize some settings on that. It's very easy to just set up all of your indicators and just set them up to be all calculate on each tick and just set everything up to be very heavy to process on every single tick, and just not necessarily know about it or worry about it. What this will allow you to do is just get in there and see what needs to be optimized, what can be changed, things like that. So the NinjaScript utilization monitor, it's been a window that's our support team's been using pretty successfully to help kind of highlight areas of improvement. And it doesn't necessarily mean just removing said indicator or anything like that. It just maybe means that indicator needs to be run with more optimized settings, for example. NinjaScript utilization monitor, I wanted to throw that little tip in there. It's a little bit hidden, but it's definitely a nice debug tool for those of you that want to get in there and look and see what's going on the product and just get a little bit more informed. So that was released, I want to say a couple releases ago, but I did want to highlight it since we are getting good feedback on it. That is the majority of what I wanted to cover in this release. Like I mentioned, this is just going to be an overview and just a community outreach as to what's going on and what's new with NinjaTrader product development. We've already started on development towards R20 and have a ambitious list of things that we're planning to do for that. It's exciting times over here at NinjaTrader on things that we're being able to iterate on the product. So with that being said, if we have any questions, Terry, I'd like to spend at least a few minutes here answering any questions that guys have had throughout the webinar, and I can revisit things in the past. So Terry, if you're there.
Okay.
Awesome.
Let's see. Is option data available for strategy development use?
That's next on the to-do list. Right now, we don't have any NinjaScript access for options. That is going to be, like I said, next on the to-do list. Okay. So the answer is no, not today.
Is option data available in CQG demo account to try out?
We're working on demo access as we speak. We haven't yet released it, but stay tuned. If you want to contact the platform support teams, they can get you some more, contact your brokers and get you some more data on that and notify you when it is available.
Okay. Can we use the option chain with IB?
It is possible. Right now, the options chain is implemented. It will work, but it just takes a long time to load. This is something that we identified with their support team. We do need to upgrade to a next version adapter of IB to get some speed improvements there. So it is usable. I'm not sure that I would personally use it just because the load time is quite long. So for now, I'm just making the statement that options is available with NinjaTrader brokerage for options on futures today, and then we're going to continue to improve support. We've got support planned. We'll review our next step with R20 is we're going to review all of our adapters, see what we can implement, and as far as option support, piping through all the data, things like that, getting that all set up. That's next on the to-do list.
Okay. Is it for options on futures only, or can you also do options on stocks?
Yeah, so options on futures only today, but we built everything in a way to where we're going to naturally be able to expand it. Options to me is a multi-month or even quarter process where we're going to continue to iterate, add some additional analytics features here, things that we need to do. So this is a process for us where we'll continue to enhance that. And to do that, we need to actually implement it on more than just NinjaTrader brokerage connection. So stay tuned for more information there as we work through active development on that.
Okay. Will there be availability to do verticals, calendars, etc.?
Yeah, so that goes on to, I think he's talking about just kind of options, strategies, and placing trades. That is something on my radar. It's not anything that I can commit to today. This goes into the whole concept of being able to submit a complex order or a basket order or a spread order all in one go. Right now, of course, you can execute said strategies in NinjaTrader just by placing one order at a time. That's totally a legit way to do it. Being able to submit all that in one go and kind of have some advanced functionality around that, that is something on our radar, but nothing I can commit to today.
Okay. Does the volume profile indicator mark high and low volume nodes?
Volume profile, high and low volume nodes. So on the volume profile, we do not mark nodes as it is today, only because the nodes, for me, they're quite easily visible when you add an indicator. Go indicators, order flow plus, volume profile. We'll do this monthly profile. Go ahead and add that. So if I add a volume profile in here, the nodes simply being, let's say I've got my point of control here, that's node 1. Then we've got a node up in here between the between the point of control and the high of the bar and the point of control and the low of the bar, and we would have either one or multiple nodes where you would see that and somehow mark that on the chart. To me, that would be useful from a NinjaScript perspective, but we don't have, let's say, NinjaScript access on the volume profile yet. So to me, that might be something we would add as part of a NinjaScript volume profile access push in the product, but something that we haven't committed to yet.
Are there any tutorials for the order flow indicator parameters?
Any tutorials? Yeah, for sure. If you email us at platformsupport@ninjatrader.com and ask exactly that question, you'll get an email back with a list of links and resources. We've got various YouTube videos on that, and then we've got our help guide, and then in addition, I've also done several Futures IO webinars that you can use for reference. But yeah, there's quite a bit of data out there. If you need help finding it, just platformsupport@ninjatrader.com, and our guys will be able to get you a few links, no problem.
Okay. Will there ever be a time that we can capture the values to use in writing custom strategy scripts?
Capture the values. I'm not sure which values the customers or the users talking about.
Yeah, I don't either.
If we're talking about volume profile, I've covered that. If we're talking about options, NinjaScript support is next on the to-do list.
It's on its volume profile is what he's talking about.
Okay, got it. Yeah, so volume profile, nothing I can comment on right now, other than it's definitely a tricky thing. You know, the interesting part about it is that the amount of code that you would need to write, I mean, the main reason why we're kind of shy on that is that the amount of code to set it all up, add this, get the values all populated, etc. You know, it's almost easier to write your own in some cases, because you usually have some different flavor on how you want to use the data, calculate this slightly different. You know, it's complex enough to where if you want to use that data, and there are people that do want to use that data through NinjaScript, you know, you end up kind of building your own flavor of it. Since the actual math on kind of adding up volume, and if you're doing a NinjaScript, the actual math on adding up volume on a price level, you know, you just kind of build a dictionary. It's not rocket science, you know. So at this time, what I advise is if you're actually wanting to build a strategy, you actually kind of add up the value and the data yourself in a more lightweight way. And if you need help on doing that, platform support at ninjatrader.com. You could put attention Brett in there too, but there's some quick guidance we can give you on how just to quickly set that up from a coding perspective. That way you can kind of control it, and it's just easier on everybody basically. So yeah, please write in if you would like some information on that, and then yeah.
Okay. I am really interested in this one. Can we set an alert when an instrument drops or goes above a selected percent correlation?
Percent correlation. So that would imply that we actually have a way to get a percent correlation in the product. What you can do is set up an alert, but the part that's missing, and there's always multiple ways to skin a cat, so maybe I'll think of something as I go here. But right now, our new added correlation indicator is just a value between 1 and -1. It's either correlated or it's not. Now, if you're wanting to see, if you wanted to express that in percent, let's just take a stab at it. But our alert functionality generally is going to be in the charts. Go to alerts here. We're going to set up a condition, which is to add a condition. This is our condition of when we want the alert to trigger. So we're going to say when the close of the ES 1219 is greater, equal, for example, our correlation indicator, which is already set up here. And what we could do is an offset here, and I have to think about this to see if this really would do what we want it to do. But let's say we were to do an offset multiplication and do like 0.75, for example. This would do a check to see if it's passed between 0.75 of the correlation. Now, this will work only on a less than condition. So you'd have to set up both the greater than and equal to set up a range. So this would be if it dropped down 25%, and then I'd have to do 1.25 if it went up 25%, and set up a range that way. But again, I'm not 100% sure that that's what the question was about, since it referenced percent correlation with something else. I'm kind of achieving that through a ratio here. So I think we would need to actually, to make this simpler to set up and maybe more like what the question's asking, we would need some facility to have a percent correlation calculation with something else more easily available. So if I'm tracking that correctly. So that's the alert functionality. I mean, at least we're able to show the alert functionality and how you could do it based on the correlation in a, and I guess, now that I go back to my math 101, I mean, this is basically a percent. I mean, if you multiply this by 100, 98% correlated. 0.98 is a correlation metric, thinking it through, that actually would take care of the customer's question. So yeah, that should do it.
Okay. Sorry, weeding through questions. Is there a end of life date for version 7?
No end of life date for version 7. We'll continue. We've still got a number of users on NinjaTrader 7. Definitely myself also described that if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. We don't have any plans to de-support NT7, although we definitely are not, we have not materially added anything to NinjaTrader 7 in the last couple of years. We only will do, let's say if we have to do an emergency fix or patch for something, we will still do that with NinjaTrader 7. But NinjaTrader 7 is basically, it's hit its maturity standpoint. It's just, there's no more active development on that code base since we've moved completely over to NinjaTrader 8 at this point.
Okay. He asked, having 2 windows open with some tabs on each one, is it possible to move one tab from one window to the other?
Not today. And there's a technical reason behind that. It has to do with our UI threads and how we create charts on different UI threads, and there's a long story there, and a bunch of technical stuff there. But as of today, no. So what I would do in that case is I would take a template of what I wanted to move in there. So I would right-click, templates, save it off, add the instrument over here, load the template. That's how I would achieve that today.
Okay. Any plan to make resetting variables and objects more straightforward when using the I can't read this. Sorry, you put a command name in there. Let me see if I can copy that.
We have variables on the tab names, if that's...
It's a is initiated on each optimization iteration equals false.
Okay, yeah.
To make it more trivial to use.
And sorry, and read the question one more time so I can try to understand.
Any plan to make resetting variables and objects more straightforward when using that option to make it more trivial to use?
Okay, got it. So this is going to be more complicated. This is a strategy development question, and this is actually pretty deep in the, I'll call it weeds on a strategy development question, which is, and just to bring any other listeners up to speed, there's a property when you're doing a strategy backtest, so you're using the strategy analyzer window inside of NinjaTrader, and you're doing an optimization, not a backtest. So if you do a backtest, you only do one single test, you're done, right? So you run through one test of your strategy, you output the results, you're done. With an optimization, you're actually going through several thousand iterations with various different parameters on each iteration of the strategy. And one of the advancements in NinjaTrader 8 over NinjaTrader 7 is that every time you allocate memory to a new instance of a new strategy to start it back up and do a next test. So let's say we've got 100,000 combinations of parameters to test. And to get through that, I've got to go through that. And with programming, if you create a new instance of that strategy for every single iteration, yes, you get a nice clean run from go to go, but you're also allocating a bunch of memory, which then it's kind of like mom with the messy teenage boy's room, it's got to go in and garbage collect and clean up that memory that's no longer used on each one of those strategy iterations. And the fact of mom coming into the room and saying, have you cleaned up your room yet, takes resources, and just allocating memory and things like that takes resources, and it just slows down the optimization. So one of the things that we added in NinjaTrader 8 is a setting called is optimization and I forget what it's called, but let me just open up the NinjaScript editor, go to strategies, sample moving average crossover, and it's a long name, which is why I have to reference it, which is instantiated on each optimization iteration true or false. And if you set that to true, it does it the way that NinjaTrader 7 used to do it. If you set that to false, it will actually reuse the same strategy instance on every single run. But to do that, it implies that you reset any state in your set defaults, or in your data loaded state, I should say, reset any data that way you don't have that data kind of messing up the next run. If you were to like keep a count of something, let's say you had a counter, count every bar, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. And then you stored some variable. I counted 100 bars, and you stored that in a variable. Well, you need to reset that counter back down to 0 for the next run. So you need something that says if that that variable equals to 0 on the next before we hit the next run, and that way it resets itself. And if you go through that pain of having to reset variables of which you would maintain if you used any, you can achieve somewhere up to 10 or multiples, a factor of 10, speed improvement on large optimization runs. But you do have to go through, and I call it pain, to reset all those things so that you don't have to have mom coming into your room and helping you clean. As far as any plans to change that, no, I don't have any concept or plan to make that any easier to do, other than just making sure that any documentation on if you would use this is as good as possible. And if you have any questions on that, you can always let our platform support team know. So I kind of went off on a long answer there, but I felt it was important to explain what that does, why it's there, and why you have to kind of reset your own stuff in that case. That's part of turning it to false. So there's not really any concept I could apply to make it any easier to do.
Okay. Can we chart lines on future time frames, specifically plotting pivots for the next day or week?
Can we set lines on pivots for the next day or week? Sorry?
Can we chart lines on future time frames? I'm assuming beyond the hard right edge, specifically plotting pivots for the next day or week.
I mean, sure. I mean, the answer is absolutely. I mean, if you want to either do it manually by hand by drawing lines, you can just draw them into the area over here using horizontal line tool. If you're doing the manual calculations, if you're doing indicators with those type of pivots, usually it's going to be calculated. Let me take a look in our pivot indicator. It's been just a few days since I've been in there. So let me open that up. So we can do daily, weekly, and monthly pivot ranges here. So let me go with monthly pivot range here.
He says not manually, as we develop custom indicators.
Oh, as we develop custom indicators. Yeah. So in that case, and I was going to get into it, but the other way is it gets into displacement a little bit. I was going to check to make sure that worked. So what you can do is, let's say you want to see an indicator. Generally, the concept is, if you want to see an indicator into the future, you would displace it. So simple moving average into the future, displace it. Say I want it to be 50 bars into the future, you would set a displacement. With pivots, since that's using lines, I don't know that really matters too much. But since this guy clarified that he's doing indicator development, in that case, absolutely, you can draw anything you want in any range. If you're confused on how to do that, our platform support team can help. There's a couple ways you can do it, either by setting your own displacement on your indicator and plotting values behind, or you can implement on render, which will allow you to specify, basically you're drawing your own line at that point. I believe that's how the pivots indicator is set up. I think it's an on render indicator, but I've got to check, which you can use as a sample on how to do that. which then you're just saying, hey, I want to draw this line from this bar on this time all the way to this future time, which doesn't have a bar yet, and NinjaTrader then will draw it out.
Okay.
Quick word of warning with that stuff, though. I will say, since the guy is using programming, one quick note. You know, with NinjaTrader, with time-based bars, going into the future is pretty trivial, since, you know, you can do the math and do, okay, you know, on a daily bar, every bar out this far is going to be this day, so draw the line out to there. On tick-based charts and things like that, where time is variable because there is no set time axis, since bars can be created as they will, then in that case, estimating into the future, it's basically an impossible task. So we just approximate things. Doing stuff in the future on tick-based bars, you just want to make sure you test in that use case, is all I'm saying.
Okay. All right, we're long on time, so I'm going to make this the last question. Any plan in the strategy analyzer to keep the chart from scrolling back to the right hard right edge when a backtest is rerun?
There's pros and cons there. I think that's a pick your poison thing, since, you know, one might say, well, I'm rerunning a new backtest, so let's start over at the front. I think that's the approach we took with NinjaTrader 8. Another might say, well, I'm just changing one thing and I want to just stay in the scroll range of where I currently was at, and I'll scroll back if I want to scroll back. That implies that we got to maintain some state as well from one run to the next, which we just elected not to do for now. So I guess long way of saying no plans right now to change that.
Okay. Is there a contact slide on your little slideshow with your email?
Contact slide? No, but okay. Easy enough, I think.
Yeah, there we go.
Brett.barrett@ninjatrader.com.
Okay. If you're watching this later on YouTube and you have questions that weren't answered, or you have suggestions, you can email Brett at the email on the screen. Thank you for the webinar, the information, and for spending some time with us this evening, Brett.
Yeah, always a pleasure. I like coming in here. Seems like every quarter I'm kind of coming in here and doing a webinar for Futures IO's guys, and so yeah, always a pleasure. Appreciate the interest and time everybody spent, and hopefully learn a little bit about what's new in the latest release in NinjaTrader.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, thanks guys. Have a good night.